What the elite point to is an all too easy problem to fall into, believing that these platitudes of Superman are divorced from reality. To think that the world isn't bad and getting worse is just to be blindly naive, and ignores the plight of those who are suffering real-world problems. It's easy to sit in your fortress of solitude surrounded by your ranks of robots and say that the world isn't all that bad. But at the same time, it's also easy to allow a bombardment of negative facts to color your view of the world. After all, the reason airplane crashes make the news is because airplane lands safely, repeated for every successful flight, more than 100,000 every single day, isn't worth mentioning, or that the number of crashes have been reduced over time. Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker said, "It's essential to realize that progress does not mean that everything gets better for everyone, everywhere, all the time. That would be a miracle. That wouldn't be progress." Funny enough, we do live in a world with miracles. A world where miracles are in fact mundane. We regularly restore sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, and allow a woman who lost her leg to dance. And advancement is not limited to the first world. Undernourishment worldwide has dropped to less than 11%. People without clean water has dropped to 9%. Infant mortality below 3%. Again, that's for the entire planet. Over the last 2 centuries, the human population has increased by a factor of less than 8, but the human global economy has increased by a factor of 100. And even in those worse off places, answers are still being found in the simplest of ways. In 2005, a study was conducted in the slums of Karachi, one of those places fitting those poor numbers: undernourished, no clean water, a 1 in 10 death rate for children under 5. The true solution would be a major infrastructure change, including a proper sewer system and water filtration. But for addressing the immediate problem, for dealing with the here and now, the answer was simple: soap. Simply giving soap to people and telling them when to use it and how to get the most out of it caused a major reduction in diseases, frequently falling near or even more than half, despite the fact that they were still living malnourished in extreme poverty and had sewage in the streets. Children who would have died lived thanks to a bar of soap. Even our humblest of technologies can make the world better. But what about the problems our modern society is causing, like climate change? Progress is being made there too, like solar panels capable not just of producing electricity, but drawing usable water out of the air. Or a natural gas power plant that produces electricity at almost no higher cost than previous plants, but doesn't have a smokestack, because it runs the turbines with the CO2 and then sells the CO2 and the other byproducts off for industrial use. But who could use that? How about a company in Finland which has found a way to use solar panels to split water and, together with CO2, feed those raw chemicals to microbes which then produce a safe and consumable food source with 0 food products being required at any stage in the production? Or factories that are turning CO2 directly into things as varied as plastic, a new stronger form of concrete, and perfume. Or, if you hate fossil fuels even when they're clean, how about MIT's quiet work over the past few years with investors to produce a working power plant to generate electricity using fusion power? Yes, fusion reactors, the science fiction idea, may become a reality not in our grandchildren's lifetimes, but in our grandparents' lifetimes. Okay, you might be saying all our gadgetry and science is great, but you're missing the real problem, which is people. Except that all our gadgetry and science are important there too. The issues that have driven human problems throughout our existence are being eliminated by those things. They haven't solved all problems, certainly. A new app can't eliminate bigotry. A better reactor won't end tribalism. A new species of high-yield, high-nutrition grain is not going to stop extremists. But by removing desperation from the equation in many places, we allow our more rational and empathetic aspects to flourish. Superman's repeated point is that good doesn't mean perfect. Likewise, human progress does not mean that we live in utopia. But the absence of utopia does not mean that things are getting worse. Indeed, could we really agree on what utopia should be? The idea that Superman is passé for our modern world is to ignore that the world was worse and we're only more aware now of its problems. Things were hardly sunshine and roses when America and Russia were on the brink of nuclear annihilation, when progress in China meant starving to death, when a country that couldn't shut up about how free it was had signs around saying whites only. These are not times more desperate than others, and so the demand that they call for desperate measures rings hollow. It was said, "We cannot absolutely prove that those are in error who say that society has reached a turning point, that we have seen our best days. But so said all those who came before us, and with just as much apparent reason. On what principle is it that with nothing but improvements behind us, we too expect nothing but deterioration before us?" And the man who wrote that did so almost 200 years ago. I'll reiterate points that I've said elsewhere